Every nation on Earth, from the ancient Sumerians to the tribes of the Amazon, has preserved legends about extraordinary beings who towered above trees and possessed strength far greater than any known animal. Official history dismisses these accounts as collective myths, symbolic stories, or literary exaggerations. But there is one major problem. Fantasies do not leave real bones behind, yet these beings did. In 1848, Abraham Lincoln, then still a simple congressman, was sailing past Niagara Falls on a steamboat. In his diary, he wrote a line that today sounds like a direct challenge to mainstream history. Lincoln noted that the eyes of an extinct race of giants whose remains fill the ancient mounds of America once gazed upon Niagara exactly as we do today. For him, the existence of these giants was not debatable. In his time, it was considered common knowledge. Farmers regularly dug up enormous bones on their land, and newspapers reported such discoveries with the same casual tone as weather forecasts. To truly understand how deeply the image of giants is embedded in human memory, one should turn not to school textbooks, but to the oldest texts on the planet. Sumerian clay tablets over 4,000 years old describe rulers nearly 4.5 meters tall as real kings with specific reign dates. The king list from Nippur mentions dynasties where certain lords ruled for 20 or even 30,000 years. Their physical descriptions leave no doubt about their non-human proportions. The Sumerians depicted the Anunnaki as twice the size of ordinary people, and in reliefs, these figures hold lions as easily as a child holds a kitten. One could call this artistic license, but then the same proportions appear in Egyptian bas-reliefs, Indian temples, and even rock paintings by Australian Aboriginals who never had contact with Sumer or Egypt. The Bible mentions giants in at least 12 different books, and not just Goliath. In the Book of Genesis, there is a passage that long puzzled theologians. There were giants on the earth in those days, especially after the sons of God came into the daughters of men. These beings were called Nephilim, meaning those who descended or those who were cast down. The Book of Enoch, later removed from the canon, describes them in much greater detail. According to it, 200 fallen angels descended on Mount Hermon, took human wives, and from this union were born powerful creatures. The text gives their height as 300 cubits, roughly 135 meters by ancient measures. Even if divided by 10, that still leaves an impressive 13 meters. The Book of Enoch was excluded not because it was a forgery, fragments were found among the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran, but because its content did not fit the new doctrine that positioned humans as the only intelligent species on Earth. Write in the comments which country you are from and whether you know local legends about giants in your region. We will see that such stories exist literally on every continent without exception. The Greeks distinguished between titans and giants, two different types of enormous beings. The Scandinavians knew them as Jotun, ice giants who existed before the world was created. The Indian Mahabharata describes Rakshasas as tall as towers who could hurl entire trees and change shape at will. The Navajo tell of the man-eating giant Yetso, whose dried blood became the lava flows near Mount Taylor in New Mexico. Geologists do confirm the unusual mineral composition of those flows. If this concerned only 2 or 3 cultures, we could speak of ideas spreading through trade. But when completely isolated peoples describe almost identical beings with matching details, it stops being mere coincidence. If you want to know where these trails lead, subscribe to Science Etherics. Here we dig up what others prefer to keep buried. Let us move from legends to actual discoveries, because this is where history turns into a real detective story. In 1911, miners digging bat guano in Lovelock Cave, Nevada, uncovered a burial that did not fit any textbook. The remains belonged to individuals of unusual proportions, and some skulls still had tufts of coarse red hair. The local Paiute tribe was not surprised. Their oral tradition had long preserved memories of the Siteka people. Elders described them as red-haired cannibals of enormous stature who came from the sea. According to legend, united tribes drove the last giants into this cave and sealed them inside by setting fire to the entrance. Archaeologist Llewellyn Laud conducted official excavations in 1912. He documented oversized sandals and unusually large woven baskets. Some artifacts remain in the Nevada State Museum in Carson City, while the skeletons were scattered into private collections and university storage. Lovelock Cave was not an exception. In the 19th century, American newspapers regularly carried reports of giant skeletons. In 1883, the St. Paul Daily Globe wrote about bones over 2 meters tall found in a Minnesota mound. In the Ohio Valley, opening burial mounds repeatedly revealed massive skulls with double rows of teeth, unusually long femurs, and copper ornaments that would not fit an ordinary man's arm. Where did all these hundreds of finds disappear to over an entire century? The answer is closely tied to John Wesley Powell, director of the Bureau of American Ethnology. He promoted the idea of linear human evolution and an empty continent before the arrival of Native Americans. Anything that contradicted this was declared a hoax, measurement error, or the result of disease like acromegaly. The Smithsonian Institution systematically collected these artifacts with promises to study them, but many vanished without trace. Now let us look at the stones, because the architecture of giants speaks louder than any skeleton. In Baalbek, Lebanon, the foundation of the Temple of Jupiter contains 3 trilithon blocks, each weighing about 800 tons. Nearby in the quarry lies an unfinished monolith over 1,000 tons. Official archaeology credits the Romans, but no Roman text describes moving 1,000-ton blocks. The most powerful Roman crane described by Vitruvius could lift only about 6 tons. Megalithic architecture worldwide presents the same puzzle of scale. In Sacsayhuaman, blocks up to 120 tons are fitted so tightly that a knife blade cannot pass between them. Steps half a meter high would be uncomfortable for normal humans, but perfect for beings 3 or 4 meters tall. Doorways in Maltese temples and the 70-ton granite sarcophagi in the Serapeum of Saqqara also raise questions. How were such heavy boxes moved into narrow tunnels and sealed with massive lids without modern machinery? Science accepts the existence of Gigantopithecus, a 3-meter ape weighing up to 500 kilograms that lived alongside early humans. It also recognizes Denisovans with massive jaws, yet it firmly rejects the possibility of large human-like beings. However, Earth's atmosphere in the distant past may have been much denser with higher oxygen levels. In such conditions, gigantism becomes biologically viable, as shown by giant insects of the Carboniferous period. Ancient texts from the Bible to Indian Vedas describe people living for hundreds of years. This may have a scientific basis in a more oxygen-rich environment. After a global catastrophe, changing conditions likely led to reduced height and lifespan, exactly as described in the Bible after the flood. Our brains still react with fear to figures that look almost human but have wrong proportions. The uncanny valley effect. Where does this ancient instinct come from, if not from real encounters with large two-legged beings that hunted humans? Folklore across all cultures confirms this. The giant is never a wise teacher, but always a man-eater. Many finds in American mounds mention a double row of teeth, a trait extremely rare in modern humans. This could indicate a separate biological species. Early settlers in the Ohio and Mississippi valleys found not untouched wilderness, but traces of a vast ancient civilization, thousands of artificial mounds arranged in precise geometric patterns. Native tribes openly said, "We did not build these. They were made by those who lived here long before us." All this evidence forces us to think not only about the past, but also about the future. Our current height, lifespan, and abilities are not the fixed limit of our species, but only a temporary state determined by the environment we live in. If conditions change again, no one can predict what forms humanity might take. The greatness of a civilization is not measured by the size of its bodies, but by the courage to ask questions that others are afraid to voice aloud.